Yo guys, what's up? Today we're gonna be making one of our favorite recipes. We're making a homemade bone broth. We've been making it every single week. We got a couple jars in the fridge right now. So a lot of people wonder what's the difference between bone broth and just normal like chicken stock or beef stock, and there's actually a huge difference. And it's all in the amount of time you cook down the bones. So with bone broth, basically the goal is to get all of the collagen and the nutrients out of it so you can intake those when you drink your bone broth, and you're not gonna get all of that in chicken stock or any sort of broth. So that's why this process is so much longer. So today we're gonna be using an Instant Pot. That is a lot easier. It pressurizes it, so it takes like 3 hours as opposed to doing it on a stovetop, which you can also do, which would take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. So if you are doing it on the stovetop, if you don't have an Instant Pot, you'll be doing the same exact process, except just boiling down for a lot longer. We've done it on the stovetop and we'll just do it overnight. So let's talk about which bones we should get. So we like to get our bones at Whole Foods. They have grass-fed beef marrow bones, and that's generally what you're looking for when you're trying to make some homemade bone broth. You could probably also get these at your local butcher. They probably have a frozen section, or you can just ask. But we found that all Whole Foods we've been to like 4, have these bones in a frozen section. But just over 3 pounds for $9. It may seem pricey, but it makes a lot of bone broth, as you'll see. So right here we have just over 4 pounds of bones. You can do as much as you want. This is generally what we do, and this makes about 6 16-ounce ball jars of full broth. So the first step we're gonna do is boil all of these bones on the stovetop. So I'm just gonna add them to a large pot. So we're gonna fill this up with water, and we're gonna bring this to a boil on high heat on the stovetop. So I just filled it up so all of the bones are covered in water, and turned it on to high heat, and we're just gonna bring this to a boil. This usually takes around 20 minutes, and you'll notice that like a lot of gross froth comes to the top, and then that's good. All right, so it's been about 15 to 20 minutes, and you can see all of that grossness rise to the top. So I'm gonna skim a little bit of this off to make it easier before I drain it. So now I just have a big baking sheet right here, and the oven is heated to 400 degrees. We're gonna roast the bones for 20 minutes. So we're just gonna roast these fully through for 20 minutes. All right, so I just pulled this out of the oven. Since there's a lot of bones, pretty thick pieces, I went for 25 minutes. So now we're just going to pile these guys into our crock pot. There's a lot of good stuff on this pan still. So if you can scrape it up, that's what you want to do. You don't want this fat to go to waste, so I'm also going to add this right to the bones. So a lot of people, or a lot of recipes you may see online, they discard the fat, they don't add it, but it makes it tastier, and you definitely want a lot of fat when you're getting all these nutrients, in my opinion. It's as easy as just filling up the rest with some water. You want to make sure all your bones are submerged. Ooh. Put it back in your Instant Pot. We're just gonna add a bunch of pink salt. I like to just eyeball it, add a good bit. You're just gonna put the top on and make sure your nozzle is to sealed, not to vent, because you want this to pressurize. So I'm turning that to sealing, and then we're just gonna go manual. And so you see 60 here, that means it's 60 minutes. We're gonna start with 3 hours. So I like to go anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours, depending on the amount of bones. So there are a lot of different models of Instant Pots. We'll link the one we use below. You leave it, and in 3 hours, it'll beep and you'll know it's good to go. So it's been 3 hours, the bone broth is done, and we let it sit for about 30 minutes because then that'll just naturally vent the Instant Pot itself. You can hear that pressure. Look how good that looks. And let me show you. So you saw the marrow and everything on the bones, and now look at it. It's just literally fall off the bone. So I'll let this cool for a little bit in here before I strain it. And I usually do it for an hour, and then it's not too hot and you can bottle it up, jar it up, and put it in the fridge. You don't want to let it sit out for too long or like completely cooled. That'll allow for bacteria buildup, and that's never a good thing. All right, guys, the bone broth has cooled. I actually strained it pretty soon after I showed you that it was done, and all the bones came out with all of the cartilage and just everything that came out of the bones. There's some meat in there, as you can see. We've just discarded this and not used this at all. And we've also used an immersion blender to just really puree it and then add it back into the bone broth. So you're not gonna get like the big chunks when you're drinking it or using it, but it's still, you're using all of this cartilage and the meat and whatever nutrients are in here within the bone broth. There's probably not a ton, but some of you might not wanna waste it and you might want it. But all the good stuff is right here. Right here, and this is a lot. So I brought out 6 ball jars, and we are going to distribute this as evenly as possible. Then we set that aside, and as you can see, all the fat is separating out and floating up to the top. So as we're filling with these each at a time, we can make sure there's an even ratio of fat and bone broth in each. So that is 6 ball jars filled up. At this point, I'm just gonna screw the lids on. I'm gonna pop them in the fridge. They'll harden, the fat will harden all at the top, and the bone broth will be all at the bottom, and it'll be gelatinous. And that's a sign of a good bone broth. Now Matt's gonna show you how we heat this and use it for the weeks to come after it's already been refrigerated.
Okay, so once your bone broth cools, this is what you're left with. You got a couple jars like this, and one of these jars is about 4 servings of bone broth, and it's like a big glass too. So that's like, what, 24 glasses of bone broth for $10 worth of bones or something? Is really like a good value proposition there. So check it out. A lot of people, when they're making bone broth, they skim the fat off, which is for dum-dums. So what we have here is actually the fat is on top there. Like calculating the nutrition for something like this is kind of tough. So the way I do it is I just kind of calculate it by the amount of fat that I want to consume at that time, and then take an equivalent amount of the remainder there. Portion this off into quarters. I'm actually gonna make what I call a bulletproof bone broth, so I'll show you how to do that. We're gonna add this to a blender. So you can see that's, maybe that's like a tablespoon worth of fat. What I like to do is I also add a tablespoon of butter. Just makes it taste better and, you know, nice and creamy. And I always crack some pink salt in mine. It really like brings out the flavor, and that's all there is to it. And I'm gonna add some hot water. We're gonna blend it. And there you have it. Check this out, guys. How good does that look? This is a bulletproof bone broth. This is the only way I really make it. It's really good. So good. I love the butter. The butter is what really makes it delicious. Bone broth, it's not like really flavorful because we didn't put any vegetables or anything in it. This is great though, guys. Super easy in an Instant Pot. It's easy on the stovetop too. It's also, if you have a crock pot, we've done it like that before too. Give this a try, guys. Really easy recipe. You can probably get the bones from your butcher if you have one. We don't have a butcher. I guess people have butchers. And then you can also just always find them at Whole Foods. So, this is delicious, guys.